One of the most fascinating stories in the Old Testament is the story of the building of the temple. Now, I might say that to you, and you might say, well, that doesn't really sound that interesting at all. But it really is once you take into account why it ever came into being in the first place. So if you remember anything about the Old Testament, you might remember that King David was just a wonderful king. He obviously had his hang-ups and things that he was disciplined for. But God still regarded him as someone after his own heart. King David was this man of great wealth, of great power, and at this time in history, God's presence was contained, contained's not the right word, but located within the tabernacle. Okay, so if we remember anything about the tabernacle, Moses established the tabernacle way back when, and it's just this tent. It's beautiful, it's made of all kinds of skins and fabrics and rings and metals and woods and all of those kind of things. But it was a tent, well, let's just face it. And God was absolutely happy with his presence dwelling within that place. But fast forward to David. David looked at his accommodations and he decided, when he's looking at the palace made of stone and gold and bronze and cedar is what the scripture says, he looked at how big his place was and then looked at the tabernacle and he thought, a dwelling for God needs to be really, really, really nice. Now he prayed about it and God spoke to him and said, hey, you do not need to build me anything else other than what I have requested of you many generations ago. But David says, no, God, this is on me, And he set aside materials, resources, and plans to build the same kind of structure, but much bigger and much more elaborate. And God still said, well, okay then, I'm not going to have you build it, I'm going to have your son build it. So that's interesting because God did not want this amazingly beautiful monument to him, and for some reason people look at David as the one who got it all done, So God wanted to have the glory for that. So here comes Solomon, right? Solomon takes all of these resources, adds his own, takes the plans, just makes it gets the best architects and gets the best artists and just goes all out for God. And this temple is absolutely beautiful. But here's the problem with that big temple and its beauty and all of that and all of the functions that it has all the new bells and whistles, In today's economy, it might have just this complex system of computer generated, I don't know, you can imagine. But Solomon says, I want this to be dedicated to God. So God says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. Why did he say that? Why in the context of Solomon's building of the temple did he say that? Well, the problem was you could build this incredibly extravagant structure, but if the presence of God is not in it, then it's just an absolute waste of space and time and resources. So there was this massive revival, really, that's what I would call it, that broke out because people were falling on their face and calling out to God because they could not afford for God not to be in the midst of it. And it's interesting today that sometimes we don't think that way. As a church, we would love a wonderful facility. We would love all of these things, all of the bells and whistles, but ultimately we could have all of those things, but if the presence of God is not in it, then it's just a waste of time. because that's what we're about. We want God to get the glory, not us. So that passage that you've heard before, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. That is from Chronicles 7:14, 2 Chronicles 7:14. And in the thoughts of the people thinking, what do we got to do to have God dwell in the midst of this? God is saying it's very simple. It's not about money. It's not about influence. It's not about this bartering system. It's very simple. This is what I'm looking for. Today happens to be the National Day of Prayer, and I would call us all to that. And in the life of the church, we are going to see a lot more opportunities to pray and to pray with one another. Don't let those times go by without participating. We can't afford not to have God in the midst. So, think about that this week, and I hope you have a wonderful week.